What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of UFC action, and we have a pay-per-view on deck this week, UFC 288, featuring a bantamweight bout, potentially 5 rounds of action from the reigning defending champion, Aljamain Sterling, taking on the returning, formerly retired 2-division champion, Henry Cejudo, the only man to hold an Olympic gold medal and a UFC title. And it's going to be a fun scrap because we haven't seen Henry Cejudo in 3 years now. So, intriguing matchup with a lot of questions there. The rest of the card does not have that pay-per-view star-studded ring to it, but there is a 5-round co-main event, potential title implications between Gilbert Burns and Belal Muhammad. That one's pretty solid. You know, there's some fun women's fights in the card as well. And some bangers, don't get me wrong, but just not like that pay-per-view ring to we're used to having. So hit the like, hit the subscribe. We'll dive into this breakdown. Join me on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Central Time. I'll be having my friend Dale from the Punch List MMA podcast, who will be in attendance at the fights on Saturday as well. I'm sure he's fired up to come on the podcast and talk fights and bets with us. So with a pretty big card on the schedule right now, I'll try my best to be brief in these predictions, go over it more in detail from a props and betting perspective on Wednesday with Dale. So hit the like, hit the subscribe, and let's break into the first prelim of the night. First fight of the night at bantamweight between Daniel Santos and Johnny Munoz Jr. Should be an exciting fight because Daniel Willie Cat Santos, one of these blonde Brazilian squad members down there at Diego Lima Shoot-to-Box, training with guys like Charles Oliveira, and he fights very similarly. Aggressive Muay Thai, always on the gas, keeping his opponents on their back foot, giving them no room to breathe. That can lead to Daniel Santos getting hit a lot, but he's proven to recover pretty fast. In his last fight against John Castaneda, he was able to absorb a lot of punishment in round 1, come back in round 2, and overwhelm Castaneda with strikes and knock him out with a vicious knee against the cage. And that's pretty uncharacteristic of John Castaneda, who's a very technical striker, a lot of UFC experience, and he just gassed himself out trying to finish Santos, and having to move and be elusive on his back foot, I think, gassed him out as well in that fight. So Santos did miss weight for that performance last October, but he's still 28 years old. That was his second fight in the UFC, the first one against Julio Arce. He actually got out counterstruck. So Arce, just a more technical striker, able to be elusive, move on his back foot, avoid the heavy strikes of Santos, and counterstrike to a decision win. But overall, Santos, again, maybe not the most durable guy going, not the most defensively sound guy going, but his recoverability he showed against Castaneda was impressive. He ate some big strikes, never stopped moving, even when he got knocked down. He showed he's not a slouch in the ground either. He's able to throw up submissions and forced to scramble to get back to his feet. So Johnny Munoz Jr., lifelong grappler, BJJ master. You know, he's been a black belt for a long, long time, going 2-2 in the UFC. This guy has got 9 finishes out of 12 wins, with 7 of those 9 stoppages being submissions. So far he's kind of hit or miss, trading wins or losses in his last few fights. Just beating Ludovic Shaolinian in his last fight. And that was a pretty impressive fight, although he was supposed to win as a pretty sizable favorite. He was able to keep the fight standing, and with 2 grapplers there, he was probably the better submission specialist out of the 2. So Shaolinian able to keep it on the feet and just get outstruck. You know, Munoz Jr., even though he's a grappler, he's got comfortable striking, a nice jab, some quick 1-2s, you know, throws some leg kicks out there on occasion. But obviously, if this one stays standing, I think Santos will be by far and away the better, more effective striker and probably end the fight inside the distance. But I think Santos is also athletic and quick enough to sprawl and brawl effectively. If you watch Santos fight, he's never accepting bottom position. Even if Munoz can take him down, I don't know if he can hold him down for the majority of 15 minutes. I would be surprised. So unless Munoz can take him down, you know, force a scramble where he can grab the back and get a quick choke in, I think Santos is going to make him work far too much in this fight. And I think Santos, within 2 rounds, knocks him out. So give me Daniel Santos. As a minus 155 money line goes, I think that's a pretty good cost. So I'm going to have 2 units on him at that price tag. Johnny Munoz Jr. can be had at plus 135. I'd be more on the side of Munoz Jr. getting a submission as his main method of victory here, more than him winning by decision. So I say Santos is more able to win either inside the distance by strikes or still win a dominant decision here over 3 rounds, just with his better striking and keeping the fight standing. So give me Santos to win. Up next at middleweight, we've got a battle between two pretty large 185ers, Joseph Holmes taking on Claudio Ribeiro, and both of these guys are pretty much beginners as far as the UFC roster is concerned. Joseph Holmes having to get both a win on the Contender Series and a win in Fury FC, looking for a fight in order to score a UFC contract. And then he comes in here and does not look that impressive at all, going up against a guy who can match his stats at 6'4" and with a 80-plus inch reach. And that was one of the worst guys in the roster in Jamie Pickett. And Pickett actually got a decision win over Joseph Holmes. So that was kind of like a red flag off the bat, making his debut. And it started to be a little bit apparent that Joseph Holmes is a guy who made his way through the regionals with these big physical advantages at 185. A nice long jab, good leg kicks, could maintain distance against smaller guys on the regionals, and kind of grind them against the cage in the clinch and work a submission game on the mat. That's kind of what his MO is going to be in most of his fights. He does have some knockout power, but not the best striker with the best hand speed. He kind of needs that clinch grind and to wear guys out and use his size to bully them. But when faced against a guy with the same advantages, he lost to a pretty bad guy in Jamie Pickett. Got a nice gift in Alan Amedovski for his next fight, who was ended up going 0-4 in the league. He clubbed and subbed Amedovski in round 1. And then he went up against Junyon Park, which was last October. And Junyon Park basically flipped the script on him. He was able to find the chin of the larger man in Joseph Holmes, grind him against the cage, take him down, and tap him out in round 2. So looking to right the wrongs of his UFC career so far and maybe expose Claudio Ribeiro as the worst middleweight. But Ribeiro's got that just insane explosive power. He is a big guy at like 6'1" or 6'2" with a very long reach that can kind of rival that of Joseph Holmes. Just these big looping limbs and his hooks that are pretty vicious up close. He fires off front kicks and calf kicks and is pretty loose and creative. He'll be the better and faster mover in this matchup with, of course, the more power as well. But there seems to be a timer on that power because most of his wins out of his 10 knockouts are all under 1.5 rounds, except for one that actually stretched out in the regionals to round 5. But pretty lackluster fight there. Ribeiro made his debut in January against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, who is another fellow power puncher, but Hassan has the judo background, the ability to grapple. He pushed Ribeiro wisely against the cage in round 1, wore him out in the clinch, and then in round 2 was able to capitalize with that knockout power. But that's what we're not going to see from Joseph Holmes, is that knockout power to match Ribeiro. So I think Ribeiro will find the chin of Holmes early, probably in round 1 or under 1.5 rounds, and knock him out. Not that I've seen, too much of a durability issue from Joseph Holmes. I just think he's untested as far as his chin is concerned. So give me the faster man, the more explosive risk taker than Claudio Ribeiro. Not something I want to get invested in, though. He's like a minus 185 favorite or so. I think money is coming in on Joseph Holmes slightly, just because people are seeing some dog odds on a guy with UFC experience with good stats. But, unless Joseph Holmes plays a perfect fight here, stays safe in round 1, starts grinding out Ribeiro in the clinch, and then getting a submission, that would be his path. But I think Ribeiro gets the job done rather early here. So probably not going to back this guy with my money. If I were, it would be by a knockout prop. Flyweights up next, we've got the debuting Rafael Estevam, 11-0 prospect from Brazil, coming off the Contender Series, taking on the 6-fight UFC veteran Zhalgas Zhumagulov, the Kazakh fighter that is on a 3-fight losing streak and currently 1-5 in the UFC, which is shocking for Zhalgas because if you know how this guy got into the UFC, it was from being champion in Fight Night Global overseas, taking out well-known names in the industry like Tagir Ulanbekov, Ali Bagotinov, Tyson Nam. I mean, these are all high-level guys before he got to the big stage. And, now he's been in a lot of close fights. That's been a common theme for his career, and it's cost him in a lot of those split decisions. So his last fight was against Charles Johnson. He dropped, again, another close split decision. He got fouled a bunch in that fight, but it was a high-output striking affair between those two fighters. Rafael Estevam is coming off of a very good Dana White Contender Series appearance where he was able to break the will of João Elias. By round 2, he got a ground and pound stoppage. Great use of elbows and ground and pound, and that's what you're going to get from Estevam, is a high-pace, high-aggression fight where he's just going to shoot for takedowns, get the fight to the mat, which is his world. He advances position well, softens up his opponents with punches and elbows accurately, and stays strong on top. He's got cardio to last. He can, rinse and repeat takedowns. And his striking looks like it's coming along, but at 26 years old, I think Zhalgas at 34 in a long career is going to be much better at striking at distance when this is on the feet. So it's imperative that Estevam get this fight to the mat, but not many people have done that to Zhalgas, especially in the UFC. I think only... I want to say only Amir Albazi has actually taken Zhalgas down. Some people have gotten control time over him, but as far as taking him down off of his feet, I think it's only been Amir Albazi. And Zhumagulov is no slouch on the ground either. So I think Estevam, even though he's 11-0, he's got 7 stoppages out of those 11 wins. He's the favorite in this matchup. Money's coming in on him at minus 180. Plus 150 can be had on Zhalgas. I think Zhalgas is the side here from a money line perspective, and just the pick and prediction for me. I'm going to go with Zhalgas to hopefully end this fight inside the distance against the newcomer, because if this goes to the scorecards, he's probably going to be screwed out of another split decision. And if you look at the record of Zhalgas, that is a gripe. The guy certainly, if it's a low output striker he's facing, he'll also be defensive and low output as well by the numbers. If you see like a high output striking affair like that against Charles Johnson, then Zhalgas will level up and be aggressive, but he's always hanging out in the pocket longer than he should, getting hit, either just as much as he lands or slightly more on average. So as long as he keeps us on the feet, he's pretty good at cage wrestling as well. Good balance, a good strength in the clinch. So I'm going to take the seasoned veteran in Zhalgas Zhumagulov. I don't think he's ever cashed as an underdog in the UFC, and he's not on a great run. So just in case he's mentally broken, or if this 11-0 prospect is the real deal here, I'm going to stay off of this from a moneyline perspective, but as a pick, I'll take Zhalgas to win. I guess I'll say by split decision. Middleweight bout up next between Ikram Aliskerov, who makes his debut against the returning Phil Hawes. A pretty fun matchup here between two middleweights that are well-sized for the weight class, 6 foot tall. 30 years old for Aliskerov, 34 for Phil Hawes, and they both have about the same reach. But the Russian Aliskerov is 13-1 as his pro record, mostly competing in the Brave CF organization. Faced a pretty good variety of opponents there, going 8-1. His only professional loss so far coming by way of knockout to Khamzat Chimaev. So it was a brutal, devastating uppercut that flatlined Aliskerov, but I mean, if you're going to lose to somebody on the way up, it's got to be Khamzat Chimaev is the best option. Phil Hawes, on the other hand, he's a D1 collegiate wrestler, and in the UFC, he's never been taken down. But the guy has only faced some takedown threats from, I think, only one person, and that was Kyle Dawkins, who was unable to get the takedowns, and as a BJJ player, ended up on his back to lose that decision. But going back through Phil Hawes' career in the UFC so far, it's really up and down, and not that impressive when you look at it recently, right? Losing by round 1, he got his knee snapped off in round 1 by Roman Dolidze, and then unable to escape his vicious strikes, he got knocked out. He beat Jourdain Win impressively, but, as any sort of potential in the UFC at middleweight, you should be able to take out Jourdain Win, who's super undersized. He lost by round 1 knockout to Chris Curtis, and before that was the win over Kyle Dawkins. And then after that, we're all the way back to Nasruddin Imavov, way back in, I think, 2020, where he gassed out and squeaked by a majority decision win. So Phil Hawes, an explosive striker early, tends to fade late, and his durability is a big issue here, right? He got knocked out badly on the Contender Series years ago against Julian Marquez. He's been knocked out by Chris Curtis. I mentioned the Dolidze knockout. And Lewis Taylor submitted him in the World Series of Fighting, but that was actually like a club-in sub. So his chin has failed him on many occasions. His cardio has failed him. So far, the only thing he's got going for him is that early knockout power, and that's his best chance in this matchup, because I think Aliskerov can out-wrestle Phil Hawes. Even though Phil Hawes comes from a D1 background collegiately, I think Aliskerov is the real deal with his chain wrestling. He will not give up on positions the way that somebody like Kyle Dawkins was taking him down. Like that was, he worked for one position. If he couldn't get it, he just gave up on it. Aliskerov is a guy with very good level change ability, great speed and power to drive through takedown attempts, and I think he will get Phil Hawes on his back and out-scramble him, even if Phil Hawes tries to test his wrestling. So if I can make a critique about Aliskerov, his cardio can sometimes be a little bit suspect as well. We see him fade late, but again, the chain wrestling will do that. His striking is very basic as well, and I think early Phil Hawes will be the much faster man with the hands, the much more dangerous man with the striking early. But as the fight goes on, as Aliskerov keeps pushing the wrestling, submission attempts, if we see round 2 or round 3, I think Aliskerov will start working the game a little bit harder with the striking and be the faster man on the feet as Phil Hawes wears out. So give me Aliskerov. I like the money line a lot more where it's at now at minus 215. Earlier in the week, or at least last week it was like a minus 300 opening for Aliskerov, even a minus 275 to minus 250. That was a bit much, and you could have looked at the Phil Hawes side at that money line. But right now, plus 185 Phil Hawes, minus 215 Aliskerov. I really do find myself wanting to place a bet on Aliskerov here. I think he's going to be the better man. I'm not sure I'm going to lay the chalk on him as a debut here, but we'll see as the week goes on where the money line goes. Give me Aliskerov by either a late finish, submission, or by decision here. Heavyweight fight up next between Parker Porter and Braxton Smith. And Braxton Smith making his long-awaited debut after coming back to mixed martial arts after some time off. Now he's scored 5 first-round knockouts all in 2022. Really the first year I think he's been taking mixed martial arts seriously as a pro. He did make his debut about 9 years ago, a round 1 knockout loss to a fellow debuting fighter by the name of Chase Sherman. So Sherman's illustrious UFC career, his pro MMA career was started at the hands of Braxton Smith by knocking him out. So that's kind of a weird little historical factoid there, but all of these knockouts that I've seen from Braxton Smith have been devastating ones, knocking his opponents out cold. They're all low level, but I mean, the guy at 5'11" and a massive muscular frame as a former football player, he closes distance pretty well. He can be very, very low output, though. He's just headhunting one-at-a-time strikes, whether it's a Superman punch, loading up a big 1-1-2 that he either lands viciously or he misses wildly. The guy he moves pretty fast. He closes distance well. He even times a nice high head kick. I saw he knocked a guy out cold with. That was just a well-timed counter strike. I did see in an interview with the All-Star channel, though, that Braxton Smith's team, whoever he's working with now, they're saying he should not kick in this fight. And that's probably because Parker Porter offers a takedown threat. We've got a brown belt in BJJ from Parker Porter, a guy who attempts takedowns usually at least at some point in every fight if it goes past, round 1. And he's coming off of a knockout loss to Justin Tafa in February, a pretty vicious one, and also at the end of last year, a round 1 submission loss to Jailton Almeida, who grounded him and tapped him out. But Parker Porter's durability has been up and down in his career. We've seen him absorb a lot of punishment because he is very hittable. Now, a guy like Justin Tafa recently knocked him out cold, but we've seen him absorb a lot of punches from Chase Sherman, Josh Parisian, and come back and win those fights. Even against Alain Baudot, he was getting pieced up on the feet, but he was able to get Baudot to the mat and out-cardio him. And that's what Parker Porter brings. UFC experience and proven cardio as the fight goes on in rounds 2, 3, and all the way to decision. He is 4-0 in decisions in his career, but he's been knocked out about 4 times as well. So kind of hard to pick this fight. Where the odds are at, minus 180 for Parker Porter, I would never pay that price on him. Braxton Smith, the plus 155 underdog, that's just not a big enough plus number for me to back this guy at all because he's got no UFC experience. I haven't seen him pass like halfway through round 1, and the guy doesn't seem to have any sort of like minute-winning ability. It seems to be knockout or bust. So I will say, though, I'm picking Braxton Smith here, which goes against every way that I normally pick fights, but I'm just not sold on Parker Porter's ability to not get hit in round 1. And I think if he gets hit in round 1, he's going to go to sleep. I think Braxton Smith is explosive enough, athletic enough, and now that he's, kind of taking his career seriously and not just being self-trained, he could probably make some improvements here at 33 years old, still on the younger side for heavyweight. I just think he finds the chin of Parker Porter in round 1. So if you were to get more than plus 300 odds on that, Braxton Smith round 1 knockout, maybe that would be a spot you could just play a little bit of money on, nothing heavy invested, but I would just lay off this fight in general and just, if you get a nice price on the under 1.5, you could play that. But yeah, Braxton Smith should get the job done in round 1. Am I going to be surprised if he gasses himself out and misses wildly? Parker takes him down in rounds 2 and 3 and grinds him out? Not at all, but I wouldn't be surprised if Braxton Smith treats this guy like Justin Tafa just did. So give me Smith to make a successful round 1 knockout in his debut. Women's strawweight up next between Marina Rodriguez and Virna Jandiroba at 115. Both these Brazilians are ranked. Marina Rodriguez, former flyweight, and the striker in this matchup, Virna Jandiroba. She's been in the UFC for quite a while now, not fighting the most frequently, but she is a lifelong grappler and a very good finisher, too. Out of the 2 women here, Jandiroba's the better finisher by the numbers. 18-3 record for Jandiroba. 14 of those are finishes, 13 submissions, 1 knockout. And actually, come to think of it, that knockout was a doctor's stoppage due to an armbar that she managed to get on Kanato Maraca a couple years ago. So that knockout on her record is a bit deceiving. That was at the end of 2 rounds. Maraca could not continue because her arm was dislocated. So Virna Jandiroba, not the best striker at all. Very basic on the feet, not the best hand speed, not the best footwork. But she will use, on the clinch breaks, big overhand rights, hooks up close. A decent 1-2 that can be timed on worse strikers, but that's not Marina Rodriguez. So as long as this stays standing, Rodriguez should be far and away winning this fight. It's on the clinch stalemating. If Virna Jandiroba can tie up some underhooks, try to rip Marina Rodriguez to the ground, pull guard for an armbar attempt, dive on a leg for a knee bar attempt, use those positions to threaten and get to the back of Marina Rodriguez. That's really the bread and butter for Jandiroba, who's not the best decision winner. She's 4-3 in decisions, but that's how she's going to win this fight, is either by landing one of these submissions, like a Hail Mary, armbar or something, or just stalemating and making her defend submissions for long periods of a round and winning the round that way, which is basically how she just beat Angela Hill in her last fight. Probably her best win to date. Now, Marina Rodriguez, 36 years old. She will be the older woman by a couple of years, but she's going to be much bigger as the former flyweight now. She's got 6 knockouts on her record. In fact, one of them was over a BJJ fighter in Amanda Ribas a couple of years ago. But she, she's mostly a decision winner, especially at this weight class. 9-1-2 draws is her decision record, and her losses is only 1 decision to Carla Esparza and 1 TKO loss in her last fight. It was going to be a 5-round headlined bout against Amanda Lemos. Only took 3 rounds of fighting for Lemos to find that big right hook that was able to stop her in a standing TKO sequence. And Lemos was able to get her to the mat in round 2 and threatened submissions there as well. Marina Rodriguez, I don't have a lot of faith in her get-up game, but I think her takedown defense should be good enough in this fight to stay safe. She has fought the more well-rounded array of high-level competitors. Amanda Ribas, Mackenzie Dern, she largely outstruck both of them and stayed safe from their submission attempts, whereas those 2 women in particular outstruck Virna Jandiroba and beat her. So just doing a little bit of MMA math there to prove that there are levels to this, and Virna Jandiroba has largely fought strikers in the UFC. The only ones that have not been a grappler that she's fought are Felice Herrig and Angela Hill. So yeah, she had success over them, but I don't think they offered the takedown defense and the striking, high output striking and technique of Rodriguez, who's got good cardio too. So all said and done, the money line moved drastically in the favor of Jandiroba. I don't quite understand it. Where it was, it got corrected. Like, she was a -270 to -200 favorite for Rodriguez initially. Now, at that point, I could see there being value on Jandiroba to stall this out and get some ground control time. But where it's at now, -125 on Marina Rodriguez. Sign me up for that. I put 2 units on her at this point. Virna Jandiroba is a +105 underdog. Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of value there. I like Rodriguez a lot at this price. Now, if you would have gotten in on Jandiroba at +150 to +200, I think that's a very good price. That's you got some value there. But where it's at now, give me Rodriguez to win this fight with her striking. Welterweight bout up next between Chaos Williams and a newcomer, Rolando Bedoya. And Bedoya is a Peruvian fighter, but he is training in Brazil at the Shoot to Box team with Diego Lima, guys like Charles Oliveira, and of course, on the first fight of the night, we talked about Daniel Willie Cat Santos is there as well. So Bedoya is a 26-year-old Peruvian fighter, but he's going to be part of that blonde-haired Brazilian team making their way to Newark this weekend at 5'11" and a pretty long reach. He's got a good physique for the weight class, not the smallest, not the biggest 170-pounder, but he's on an 11-fight win streak, currently rocking a 14-1 record. Stellar record, not the highest level of competition in the regional scene down there in South America, but he does have, I think, 4 knockouts, 3 submissions that make up his 14 wins. And the guy is pretty durable, and we know that because even on the regionals, he's eating many punches just to land 1. So he plods forward, that classic Muay Thai technique, very aggressive, just like Daniel Santos we talked about in the first fight of the night. But this guy doesn't have that clean hand speed, the clean head movement, the clean footwork. He's really just a clunkier version of some of these guys from that camp that we talked about. So he uses nice kicks to all targets and nice body kick. He can switch stances, primarily fighting orthodox, but he will switch mid-combination. But it's just like not the most fluid guy around. He's not the most, just doesn't seem like he has that natural athleticism you see from some fighters out of that camp. But in punishment for that, he's eating a lot of shots to the face against low-level guys. So if he comes in here against Chaos Williams, who's a hard-hitting striker, just genetically super explosive, 4-2 in the UFC at this point, and rounding out his game, you see Chaos Williams attempting front chokes in his past couple fights. You see this guy defending submissions, and he stalks forward as well. So we'll see which guy concedes and goes on their back foot. I don't think it's going to be Chaos Williams in this spot. I think he's going to land on the chin of Rolando early, gain his respect, and probably knock him out under 1.5 rounds. So we're looking at Chaos Williams as a very explosive guy, still improving. Been out of the cage after losing that 3-round decision to Randy Brown last May. So he's been out of the cage for 12 months, can only be making improvements at this age. And that was actually a close fight. It was a split decision. I think it was a clear Randy Brown win, but he knocked down Randy Brown like once in round 1, I think a couple times in round 3 as well. So his power does translate late, not even just in that fight, but before that he knocked out Miguel Baeza in round 3 as well. So anytime Chaos Williams stalks you and cuts off the cage, he notices that you're moving, he's going to use that jab to set up a vicious combination, whether an uppercut, the vicious left-right hooks. Anytime he sees you throw a kick or anything, he's already pinpointing your chin. So the Rolando Bedoya has got his work cut out for him. I don't think his durability is going to hold up. I think Chaos Williams at a minus 315 money line here, I mean, that's wide, but I think it's warranted. I think it makes sense. So, probably stick him into your parlays. I wouldn't even hate that much. Looking for him inside the distance by knockout. Probably not something I'm going to have too much investment in. I might throw him in a parlay or two, but maybe even put the knockout prop in a round robin or something like that. But Chaos Williams is definitely the pick here. I think Bedoya does have a future as an exciting fighter in the weight class, but he's really got to do them a solid here and take this as his debut spot for an exciting fight on this card. Light heavyweight bout up next between Kennedy and Nzechukwu and Devin Clark, and these are two guys that I personally have trouble getting a read on, usually whenever they fight. So this by nature might be a less confident pick. But all the gifts physically and tail of the tape go in the favor of Nzechukwu, the tall Nigerian at 6'5", just 30 years old at this point with a handful of UFC fights under his belt and an 83-inch reach, which he's been using a little bit better to maintain distance the later his career has gone in the organization. He's always done a good job of stabbing those long kicks out there to all targets, leg kicks, front kicks to the body, things like that. But now he's been using his hands a little bit more, his boxing, the long jab, and straight shots. But he could be a very slow starter, kind of slow and plodding always, but especially in round 1, he can be overwhelmed and barraged the way that Ian Cutelaba did in his last fight in round 1. Guys like Danilo Marquez jumped all over him, and he had trouble getting going in that fight. Carlos Ulberg, in his most iconic fight so far, a couple years back, put a beating on him early, tired himself out, and then, using his seemingly durability, he was able to come back in round 2, and I guess he's got some cardio too to unload and take out Carlos Ulberg. That was a great win, but his durability has been up and down because a couple of fights later, he barely got tapped on the glove by Da Un Jung at the end of 2021 and got knocked out cold. So, that's always something I have to bring up because it's in the back of my mind when I break down Nzechukwu fights, is that match just seemed in particular very strange. So maybe it was an anomaly. He had an off night, but aside from that and getting caught in a triangle from Paul Craig, you can forgive a couple of these because he came in there with high IQ against Carl Robertson, showed that he has got the wrestling offense coming into his game as well. And that just shows that he's got some high fight IQ, some good coachability. That's good to see. And then he came back again and had a comeback victory over Ian Cutelaba. Started piecing him up on the feet and then scored those nice knees upon Cutelaba's takedown attempts and knocked him out. So, pretty good past 2 wins for Nzechukwu here. Where his ceiling is in the division, we're still finding out, but he's got all the gifts physically to do it, and he's got some power in his strikes. Devin Clark is a wrestler, just 33 years old, 6 foot tall, but still a very big physique for the weight class. The strong lower body. The commentary team is always, just talking about nonstop how big his legs are, which is funny, but it does lend to his ability to shoot fast takedowns, explosively drive his opponents into the mat, or into the cage, I should say. And he's switched his camps recently. In the past few fights, he now trains at altitude at Team Elevation, so that's a good change. I think that either came before his fight against William Knight or just after he signed the new contract when he got that round 3 knockout. So he did taste defeat. I don't think his durability is the best for Devin Clark. He's been knocked out a handful of times, like 3 times, I want to say, at the hands of Alexander Rakic, Alex Nicholson, and Azamat Murzakanov a couple fights ago. But again, Devin Clark came back, typical win-loss fashion. He's coming off of a win over Da Un Jung, an opponent that these guys share, as I mentioned. So aside from that, I'm not sure if they have any other common opponents. I guess Darko Stosic, they both beat by decision early on. But other than that, I mean, it should be an interesting matchup. Both guys have had ups and downs in their career. Devin Clark in particular, he's like 8-7 in the league, so almost a 500 fighter here. And again, not the best striking defense, not the best durability, not the best finishing ability either. So I think Nzechukwu is the more dangerous man here. As long as he can stay upright, I think he wins this fight and possibly inside the distance. I think Devin Clark is going to struggle to get inside that long reach, find his way in range without getting kneed in the face, kicked in the face, punched with the long 1-2s. And Nzechukwu is a guy who can slowly accelerate into a fight as well. So him being a slow starter by nature, I never really want to back him here. Me not having a great read on either of these guys, I never want to back them here. So I am going to go with the side of the favorite. I think Nzechukwu can win this, probably in rounds 2 or rounds 3 by stoppage. But where the money line is currently at, we're looking at, minus 190 for Nzechukwu, plus 165 Devin Clark. I mean, God, that just seems a little wide to me. Fight not going the distance, I'd say would coordinate more towards an Nzechukwu victory, and fight going the distance would probably go towards Devin Clark, and fight going the distance is plus money. But Devin Clark, I would just take him at that point at plus 165. So I'd look for either the finish props of Nzechukwu or just his money line. But personally, I just don't have a good read for either of these guys. So it'll be a pass, but give me Nzechukwu to win by knockout. Lightweight bout up next between Drew Dober and Matt Frevola, which is one of the most exciting matchups on this entire pay-per-view card, in my opinion, because it could go any number of ways. And it's a very binary fight to break down. Do you think that the Matt Frevola wrestle-heavy game plan, but more of a wrestle-brawling style that he brings is going to be enough to do damage on the feet and then shoot the takedown and gain control time to win? Or do you think Drew Dober can use his Muay Thai and Taekwondo background, a much more traditional and technical striker? Do you think that coupled with his durability is going to allow him to stay on his feet, kind of goat Matt Frevola into a brawl the way we've seen in his last few fights, for Drew Dober to come out on top? Which I would see if it goes that way. So if this stays on the feet, I favor Drew Dober, his power and durability. If Matt Frevola wants to make this a well-rounded mixed martial arts contest, I can still see Drew Dober winning that fight, but he'd have to really work on his get-up game, which we've seen improvements in, and just be stuffing takedowns early and being the better cardio machine and minute winner as the fight goes on. So those are the two sides here, but I'm on the side of Drew Dober really in this fight. They're about the same size, only a couple of years apart in age, in the favor of the younger man at 32, Matt Frevola, who's had very exciting fights in the UFC so far, but again, coming off of back-to-back round 1 knockouts over Genaro Valdez, who he knocked down like 5 times, and most recently Atman Azaitar, who had been out of the league for a couple of years. A hard hitter, but he got knocked out by Frevola in round 1. So before that, you got to go back and realize that Matt Frevola's durability is not all that great. He got hit by a jab cross in like 7 seconds from Terrence McKinney and knocked out cold. He got, this is no shame on his part, but he got out-wrestled and outstruck by Arman Sarukian between that time. Probably his best win was over Jalen Turner, a young Jalen Turner who got out-wrestled over 3 rounds. But before that, he's getting flatlined by Polo Reyes, dropped a couple of times in that fight. Even going back a couple of weeks ago when I was watching the Lando Venata tape for his fight with Zellhuber, I saw Venata knock down Matt Frevola a couple times in that spot, I think in round 1 and round 2. Just got Matt Frevola over-swinging, over-committing, and countered him appropriately, and that ended up being the draw on Matt Frevola's record. So, Frevola seems to really have confidence in his power and his durability at this point, trading at close range in the pocket, and I think he will probably test that again with Drew Dober. I mean, why wouldn't he have the confidence if he can knock out a guy like Atman Azaitar? He could probably test the chin of Drew Dober here, but I just don't think Drew Dober's going to fall the way that some of these guys have fallen, and I think Drew Dober is much, much more technical in the pocket than those guys. So it's going to be straight punches. It's going to be very tight hooks that are not over-swinging and over-committing. His footwork is very good, and Drew Dober, although he can be hittable, that could also be a bit of a gift and a curse in this fight. If he's hittable enough where Frevola thinks he's landing on him flush, Frevola's going to rush in and go into a firefight just like he has been recently. So I could see Dober almost playing possum in a way through no fault of his own, getting hit a couple of times, then answering back when Frevola rushes in. So I like Drew Dober's ability to, get a good butterfly guard going and work back to his feet. You saw that against Rafael Alves recently. And you've seen a lot of spots where Drew Dober shows very good cardio and power late in the fight. He's had to come back in firefights against Terrence McKinney in round 1. He came back against, like I said, Rafael Alves in round 3 and knocked him out. And even in round 2 against Bobby Green after getting pieced up last time out in round 1. So his career seems to be at an all-time high. A lot of his losses are further back in his career and early in the UFC, and even some of his submission losses, like if you go back and I think it was OAM was one of the guys that submitted him first in the UFC, Islam Makhachev, Benil Dariush. I mean, the list goes on of like killers that are really ending him. It's not just average guys like Matt Frevola. So at minus 205 to minus 215 on the money line of Drew Dober, I like that quite a bit. Now, you could probably chop that down by maybe playing a little bit of investment on his money line, a little bit on his knockout prop, because this guy is a potent finisher, and I pointed out a lot of the holes in the durability of Matt Frevola. So give me Drew Dober to win by probably round 1 or round 2 knockout, I would imagine, but he could really knock him out at any point in this fight. I think he finishes the fight. And Matt Frevola by decision, if that's a juicy number on some sportsbook this week, that could be a good hedge for this fight as well. Kicking off the main card, we've got a very fun featherweight fight between Charles Jourdain and the returning Kron Gracie. And people are kind of wondering why this fight is on the main card, but I can assure you Kron Gracie is a true specialist, and this guy has direct ties to the beginning of the UFC, being, of course, Royce Gracie's nephew, technically, I think. He is Rickson Gracie's son. So holding the Gracie name in the UFC at this point, Kron Gracie, of course, BJJ black belt, obviously, ADCC world champion, time in and time out. And then he made his debut in mixed martial arts training with the Diaz brothers and Gilbert Melendez at Cesar Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So obviously he's got a lot of ties to big names in the UFC. That's probably why he's on the main card. And if the guy's anything like his dad, Rickson, I mean, the guy's going to be a bad motherfucker, because Rickson Gracie's been, wrestling legends on the beaches of Rio de Janeiro for years. And I think Kron Gracie bears a lot of those same characteristics. As far as the aggression, the confidence, and the toughness goes, this guy's not a bad, not a small featherweight, 5'9", 70-inch reach. And at this point, he's 34 years old after being away from the game for 3.5 years. He made his UFC debut against Alex Caceres in 2019, tapped him out in, I think, just under 3 minutes by rear naked choke, and then went in there against Cub Swanson and chose to test his striking and his Muay Thai against the boxer in Cub Swanson. He got pieced up, chasing Cub Swanson around, and eventually in rounds 2 and 3 tried to keep on pulling guard. It just didn't work and go his way. So still showed very good toughness, and his striking didn't look all that bad. He's got kind of like a classic Muay Thai style in some ways, but it is mostly southpaw. It's when he gets extended in combinations for a prolonged period of time, maybe starts to chase desperately, that's when his form starts to fall apart. But as far as being like a relaxed counter striker, the guy's doesn't have bad hands for a BJJ player. And prior to the UFC, he was in Rizin for 4 fights, and I think he fought like 1 kickboxer and then 3 fellow grapplers. So he was able to tap all of those guys out. So a 5-1 record, all 5 of them under 1.5 round submissions. So pretty much exactly what you expect from a Gracie, but he probably will be the more dangerous man in this matchup, in my opinion, just because at this level of BJJ, you don't need the same amount of time, takedowns, wrestling offense, top control time to score the submission. Like at the Gracie level, you just need an opportunity, a mistake from your opponent, and Charles Jourdain makes a lot of those. At 27 years old, pretty much still a sort of a one-dimensional kickboxer in his game with explosive techniques, flying knees, spinning attacks, kicks from all angles, long looping strikes, and really more of a moment winner than he is a minute winner, judging by his 1-5-1 draw record in decision results. And even at the UFC, he's not that big of a finisher, all said and done. He usually gets hurt early, rallies late, and can sort of overwhelm his opponents with his good cardio and good durability. He's never been knocked out and only been submitted 1 time. So there's a lot to like about Charles Jourdain. He's certainly a fan favorite at this point, but just not very successful at the UFC level at featherweight. But yeah, I mean, if this stays striking, the kickboxer in Jourdain should win all day. It's just with all the explosive techniques and mistakes that Jourdain makes, I think at some point a limb will be exposed. Gracie doesn't need to get takedowns. He can pull guard. He can just jump on your back from a standing position. And at that point, he's like an anaconda in the way that he's so quick with the submissions. And I don't think it's going to take very long for him to get the tap. So Jourdain actually does have some BJJ credentials. I think he might even be a black belt. But I think it's just going to be enough to give him confidence that he can work his way out of a bad situation, maybe play jiu-jitsu on the mat for an extended period of time, and I just think that's going to be a bad move. So give me Gracie, even with the long layoff. I'll take him as an underdog here. Nothing I want to be very much invested in, but if I get a good number, like, I don't know, maybe a plus 250 to plus 350 prop on his submission, I might throw at least a half of a unit on that. That might be my only investment, if not just throwing that in like a prop round robin for the card. So give me Gracie to pull off the upset after a long layoff here. Up next at featherweight, we've got a grappler versus grappler matchup. Evloev takes on Bryce Mitchell. And you have the 16-0 undefeated Russian Evloev, the former M1 Global champion, who is now 6-0 in the UFC. We have not seen this 29-year-old since last June, where he disposed of veteran Dan Ige over a 3-round domination. It was pretty impressive to see a mix of his striking and grappling in that matchup. He hurt Dan Ige pretty bad and had him in all sorts of trouble on the mat with ground and pound as well. And he's taking on Bryce Mitchell, who just came off of fighting another undefeated prospect in Ilia Topuria a few months ago in December. And Bryce Mitchell tasted his first professional loss by round 2 arm triangle after being pieced up on the feet because Ilia Topuria could not only grapple, but he could strike at the high level as well. So no harm there. It was just a prospect versus prospect match to see where those two guys were at. And Bryce Mitchell, he's somewhere below that level right now, but he's still only 28 years old and pretty big for the weight class. Definitely the more dangerous of the two men here as far as submissions go. I would say Bryce Mitchell falls in that category, but as far as a well-rounded mixed martial artist, I give that to Evloev. And as such, Evloev is a minus 275 favorite over the plus 215 Bryce Mitchell at this point. So people are loving Evloev. We are, of course, getting not only the Russian tax for his EV last name, but we're also getting the undefeated tax on the money line as well. Both of those things do factor in, but I do think that he should be the favorite in this matchup, and I think he's going to win the fight probably by decision the way that Evloev tends to do. In fact, both of these guys tend to win by decision at this level, and the fight goes to decision. It's got to be somewhere around like minus 300. I think the over 2.5 by itself is like minus 250, so if you want to take that as a cue, whoever you think should win this fight, you could probably find a prop and play them by decision. And that's how I would intend to play Evloev here. And the guy's got insane metrics. Just to illustrate my point of how well-rounded he is, so far in the UFC, he's averaging almost 5 takedowns per 15 minutes. Over 6 fights so far. He's averaging over 4 significant strikes per minute, which is very high considering that he's grappling as well. So he's being very active on top, being very active with his boxing at distance. And Bryce Mitchell, his striking is just not at that level. So there's a couple of things that I see people pointing out as far as what you might point to. You want to say, okay, where's a spot where Evloev has been taken down? Where can Bryce Mitchell maybe expose him in the grappling? You could look to that Mike Grundy fight a few fights back for Evloev. He was taken down by Mike Grundy. Although he won the fight, he was taken down 6 times. But, Mike Grundy was diving on submissions. He was, not holding top control the best. He was really diving submission over position. And that showed a lot of good things from Evloev. Not only is his get-up game pretty solid, but he does not panic when he's getting his neck snatched up in a deep submission. He works his way intelligently out of those positions. So I draw a lot of positives from that Mike Grundy performance where he was taken down, more. I think it was 6-0, but he outstruck him on the feet, worked his way back up, and won the fight that way. So his cardio does check out as being very good as well. So all these things considered, I'm taking Evloev to win. I think he does it the way he normally does, by decision. Where I could see this being hairy is, of course, you do have this wide money line, minus 275 for Evloev. Against a fellow grappler in Bryce Mitchell. The judging, if this is going to go to the scorecards, more likely than not, this money line should be closer by nature, but Bryce Mitchell has got very good top control. If he manages to win a scramble, end up on top, He's very good at tying up the feet, getting wrist control, and just staying chest to chest and not risking losing that position. So I could see Bryce Mitchell winning minutes that way if he manages to win a scramble early in a round, but I just don't see it as being very likely. Not to mention, Bryce Mitchell has not fought many wrestlers or grapplers in his UFC career so far, and that's probably aided towards his success in being undefeated until he faced Topuria. If you look back at his record, Edson Barbosa, Muay Thai striker, he was able to take him down. Andre Fili, kickboxer. Charles Rosa, mostly a BJJ fighter, not the greatest wrestling. Matt Sales, kind of the same there, and Bobby Muffet is grappler as well. So not just like the highest level of wrestlers until he faced Topuria, and now he's facing another high-level guy in Evloev. So give me Evloev to win by decision. Women's strawweight bout up next between Jessica Andrade and Yan Xiaonan. A very interesting matchup from a lot of different angles in this one. The first being we're seeing Jessica Andrade on a very active schedule. This will be her third time this year so far fighting in the UFC. She's gone 1-1 so far, and both of those were flyweight bouts. You know, a life-changing beatdown back in Brazil in January over Lauren Murphy, where she broke divisional records for the amount of strikes landed on the face of Lauren Murphy that night. God only knows how she didn't get a TKO in that matchup. But then she went on a couple weeks' notice right after that fight and faced Erin Blanchfield, which is just a really eye-opening matchup for how good Erin Blanchfield was, who submitted her early round 2, but also outstruck Jessica Andrade, was able to stick and move and counter her in round 1. So pretty shocking in all facets of that fight, but it was on short notice, and it was at 125. So now Andrade is back down at 115. I think the last time we saw her at the weight class where she was once champion was back last year in, I think it was April, where she got that round 1 standing arm triangle on Amanda Lemos. So, you know, it's just an interesting matchup here against somebody like the caliber of Yan Xiaonan, who is certainly good, certainly improving at 33 years old. You know, a Chinese kickboxing background, a Sanda background, very, going to have a big size advantage here, 4 inches of height, about an inch or 2 of reach, and able to maintain distance with the kicking game. Nice side kicks, leg kicks, and some long linear strikes. And Xiaonan is getting better at sticking and moving, not getting caught in the pocket, but able to do her work at close range and then escape and recenter herself. And she feints very well, which you don't see from a lot of female fighters. So there's a lot to like about Yan Xiaonan and her minute-winning ability here. You see her takedown defense getting better against girls like Mackenzie Dern last time out. But it's just the difference in skill level of somebody who's been at the championship level, fought for the belt many times in Jessica Andrade, but she's only facing like really bad fighters like an aged Lauren Murphy, the ghost of Cynthia Calvillo she was able to defeat a year and a half ago by round 1 TKO. Or you're seeing her against like surging prospects on short notice, and Erin Blanchfield, or the champion herself like Shevchenko. So these are like the recent matchups of Andrade, and where Yan Xiaonan fits in that puzzle, I'm not quite sure. She's somewhere in the middle. So I think it should be a close fight. I think it's going to be Jessica Andrade working the left and right hooks, trying to get in range, close the distance against the cage, work the dirty boxing, and just land the bigger, more devastating strikes. And she's certainly the more dangerous fight ender in this matchup. One of the most dangerous women in this weight class in general. But, you know, if she can't get the fight to the mat, that's the big question. What happens? Will Yan Xiaonan be able to be further leveled up in her takedown defense at Team Alpha Male? Will she be able to maintain distance with the nice striking that we saw against Marina Rodriguez, which is, I think, her only decision loss to date for Yan Xiaonan, and that was a split decision at that. So, you know, very close matchup, as you can see. I'm going to go with the money line to help me decide here, and it's a plus 170 underdog for Yan Xiaonan, minus 200 for Jessica Andrade. I think it's dog or pass in this situation. So, you know, I want to use this as like an opportunity to learn and see where Andrade is back at her weight class with a full camp, some time off to prepare for a matchup here that she is not taking on short notice, right? So we'll see. There's going to be some questions to be answered. I want to sit back and watch, but if I had to lay a bet, I got to pick Yan Xiaonan here to pull off the upset, win more minutes here, and hopefully Andrade is like more of the headhunting Andrade that we've seen in the past, and starts losing the minutes slowly, and then by the time she realizes it, maybe then she wrestles in round 3, you know? So get some early points on the board, some slick striking from Yan Xiaonan, and she cashes as another underdog by decision. That's my prediction for this matchup if I had to bet on it. Okay, next up is the co-main event at UFC 288, a special 5-round edition of a co-main event, title eliminator at welterweight between Belal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns. Two guys who certainly earn it, and Gilbert Burns is a former title challenger unsuccessfully, but Belal Muhammad is finally maybe en route to taste a title challenge himself. And he's been on a great run. 22 wins, 3 losses, and 1 no contest for Belal Muhammad, who's a very high-volume striker, smooth, efficient, and a solid wrestler as well. He's got one of the most well-rounded games in mixed martial arts at the high level. Gilbert Burns, pretty well-rounded as well, but he's more of the explosive, dangerous man, in my opinion. Although he's a former lightweight, very jacked up, muscular guy at this weight class, and he's got one-punch knockout power. He's got some explosive wrestling, and that all complements towards his ability to snatch up submissions, since he is a world champion in BJJ as well. So he's coming off of 2 wins in 2023 at this point. Gilbert Burns just fought 4 weeks ago from Fight Night. He beat George Masvidal down in Miami at the last pay-per-view and was able to, make easy work of him over 3 rounds to a decision. And then earlier in January in Brazil, he was able to have an easy night, a round 1 arm triangle submission win over Neil Magny. Both very impressive victories. Belal Muhammad is coming off of his last TKO stoppage, standing TKO. He, probably had an extended sequence of 30 unanswered strikes against Sean Brady, who was undefeated at the time. So Sean Brady, the first man to beat and finish Sean Brady back in UFC, I think it was UFC 280 back in October of last year. So pretty awesome stuff there. That guy finally got a knockout win. He's been a decision machine, and it was one of the spots where you can just basically, it's almost like an Adesanya, right? Where you can just say, most of the time, if I bet this guy, I'm pretty safe to bet him by decision. I don't think that changes much here, but I do think that a 5-round fight does benefit Belal Muhammad, who's, like I said, one of the few people at this level to just seamlessly blend together his striking. He can expose a grappler with their striking. He can expose a striker by wrestling them, and he can do both in the same match by making in-fight adjustments and really timing. Like if a guy's a very fast starter, he can wear them out, just stay safe early, and then accelerate into a fight. You see him do that against guys like Vicente Luque. Wonder Boy Thompson, of course, he's wrestling the guy the whole time from pillar to post. So you can see, and then a guy like Sean Brady in his last fight, who's a very good BJJ grappler, you're going to see him strike the whole time and eventually TKO him. So he's really good at mixing up the pace of the fight, having good cardio, and just a solid rate of exertion over the fight. I really like a lot about Belal Muhammad, and it's probably why people are bored watching him, because he does not overextend himself and take a lot of risks. So I think he's going to be more of the same with that in this fight. I think he's going to skirt to the outside, probably play counter striker for the first part of the fight like he did against Vicente Luque. Pot shot, moving left, moving right, and then shooting a takedown, maybe just to force a clinch exchange on the cage to wear down the muscles of Gilbert Burns. Things like that are just going to be very annoying to watch. You're going to be praying for, Gilbert Burns to shoot a double leg and get a submission the way he did against Neil Magny, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think Belal Muhammad is a great underdog this week. I'm surprised that it's not... the lines aren't flipped here, but money certainly has been coming in on Belal Muhammad. He's down to a plus 110 underdog. Gilbert Burns about a minus 130. So it might be a pick-em price tag by the time the fight starts on Saturday. And I like Belal Muhammad here. So give me Muhammad, again, by his method of victory, as usual, by decision.
Okay, we've made it all the way to the main event of UFC 288. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, and let's break into this main event at bantamweight for the championship. Potentially 5 rounds of action between the reigning defending champion Aljamain Sterling as he welcomes back Henry Cejudo to the UFC, who's the former 2-division champion at flyweight and bantamweight, the only fighter in UFC history to win a title and have a gold medal in the Olympics as well, the 2008 Beijing freestyle wrestling gold medalist at the 121 division, and he's been away from the sport for 3 years now. At 36 years old, he makes his return. The last time we saw Cejudo was in his championship defense at bantamweight over Dominic Cruz, a fight he won by knockout in round 2. So he's been in the game, still behind the scenes coaching fighters at the elite level in Arizona, and he's never really been out of the picture as far as his name recognition goes, but still 3 years out of the game competitively. That's something to be said in this fight as he takes on the younger man in Aljamain Sterling, who's been righting the wrongs of his career. He had that kind of a fluky, gifted belt from Peter Yan back in 2021. Got illegally kneed in round 4 and then, got put the belt around his waist for that. But he redeemed himself with a very close split decision win over Peter Yan, a fight that was close, controversial, but still not a robbery ultimately. And then he just came back and beat TJ Dillashaw, who was injured before the fight. His shoulder popped out a minute in, and Aljamain Sterling showed no mercy, got the ground and pound stoppage in round 2. So obviously there's a little bit of hesitancy for people to give him all of the due credit as a champion, but the guy is on an 8-fight win streak on paper. He's been disposing of some pretty high-level guys, and he seems to be improving as far as his hands go. He's a little bit more relaxed and comfortable striking at distance. Nice lead jab, nice lead hooks from either stance. Throws the kicks out there, and he skirts around the ring elusively and waits for the chance for himself to get, a takedown opportunity or even just jump on their back and backpack them from any way that he could find the back, and he's good at it. So a guy like Henry Cejudo you would expect to want to play on the mat as the wrestler, but I think Cejudo will be the more comfortable man to also stand at kickboxing range, blitz in with looping strikes, and try to land something big. If somebody wins inside the distance here, I would say it's Aljamain by submission, or it's Henry Cejudo to win by knockout. And we've seen 8 knockouts out of his 16 wins for Cejudo. Mostly, again, blitzing attacks, not the most consistent striker output-wise. That would be Aljamain Sterling. But as far as landing nice left-right vicious hooks up close, big knees up close on the breaks of the clinch, that's all Henry Cejudo's game. So neither man has really been that much of a finisher at the UFC level overall. But if somebody does, it's going to be Sterling just probably, softening up Cejudo on the ground with ground and pound, looking for a submission. That would be his path. Cejudo, very nice blitzing attacks to get in range, lands big knees on the break, big, left-right hooks. He's got a nice right hook to the body, left hook up top that he tries to land as he closes distance. And as the smaller man, by every measurable, he's going to have to close the distance in bursts like that. But if it stays striking, if Aljo stays, improved elusively and can pot shot from the outside the way that Dominic Cruz was doing before the fight was ended, he could probably come away with the more higher output striking and win rounds that way. But if Cejudo has consistent abilities to touch the chin of Sterling, I think it'll optically look better. So very close fight that way. As far as who's going to engage in the takedown offense, I think Sterling will look for it, but he doesn't even have to get the fight to the mat. He can jump on the back of Cejudo, catch a leg kick and force a scramble. He's got a very good ability to just smother people and get the body triangle in somehow from any angle. So I would say if Sterling gets the takedown and gets the position he wants, he could ride out an entire round and probably just bank that round the instant that happens. Whereas Cejudo, if he gets the takedown, he tends to go for the striking output more on the ground with ground and pound, and that leaves room for his opponent to scramble, maybe even get a reversal from Sterling. So I don't think if he lands a takedown, Henry Cejudo, I don't think that really guarantees that he's going to win that round. But the opposite, I think, if Sterling does, I think he could. So there's a lot of ways for Sterling to win minutes in this fight, striking at range and not letting Cejudo close that distance, or getting on top from any way possible and just banking control as the human backpack that he's been known to be. So for those reasons, I mean, this fight is incredibly close on the numbers. Minus 115, the slight favorite for Sterling, but money has been coming in on the former 2-division champion, Henry Cejudo, at minus 105. So I got to go with the guy who has been active here, the guy who I think has more of a well-rounded way to win minutes in the fight, and that's Aljamain Sterling. But the fight is too close for me to really gain a confident edge on from the moneyline perspective, so I won't be touching that. If I had to choose a prop, it would probably be some form of the overs in this fight, as I think it's going to be close. We've only seen Sterling knocked out one time by Marlon Moraes, and oddly enough, it was the same sequence that Cejudo finished Dominic Cruz with, right? It was Sterling diving for a takedown of some sort, Marlon Moraes already aiming up a head kick, and then the knee landed and knocked him out cold. That's the exact situation that Henry Cejudo beat Cruz in his last fight. So something like that could happen, some fluky knockout like that could happen. Cejudo is quite powerful. He's only lost one time by knockout himself, and that was by way of round 1 knockout from, I think it was a knee to the body from Demetrius Johnson. So yeah, another weird statistic that I saw that actually the guy Luke Thomas, who's a very sharp broadcaster for the sport, had brought up on Twitter, and he looked at the record of title fights from the flyweights to the 170s. Just in those weight classes alone, anybody 35 years or older in those divisions challenging for a title, they went 2-28 in their combined results. So the older men at these lower weight classes are not doing that well. And the two winning records on that were both to Tyron Woodley at 170. So both of those anomalies belong to one man. if somebody were to pull off an anomaly here, it would be Henry Cejudo, who's, you know, a genetic freak. The guy's from the 2008 Beijing freestyle men's division. He was the gold medalist. So you got to be a freak. You got to break all of the barriers and all of the odds to get that job done. And I think Cejudo still could pull something out of his ass here, but I got to go with Sterling if I'm picking the fight by decision. That prop is at plus 240. Maybe if there's other books that release a higher prop for that, I might take a stab, but probably going to be clear from a betting perspective, just watching the main event entertainment-wise, and I think Sterling remains champion. Okay, there you have it, you guys. All the fights broken down for UFC 288. Sterling versus Cejudo this weekend for the Bantamweight Championship. Again, not the most exciting pay-per-view I've ever seen on paper, but it should deliver. There's some exciting fights in the main and co-main, some bangers in the prelims, and another chance to make some money this week coming off the heels of a profitable UFC Vegas 72. So let's keep the streak rolling, keep the money coming in, and I'll see you guys on a Wednesday for the live stream at 8 p.m. Central. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. I'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.